Hi folks, welcome to another episode of Government Matters here in Focus Springfield. I'm your host Mike Dobbs, and today we have one of our visits with a guy who I really want to hear from, and that's Congressman Richard Neal. Thanks for coming by, sir.
Glad to be with you, Mike.
Okay, as I got older, paper notes, something I rely on. I just want to talk to you first about the news story that I saw yesterday about you visiting an ICE detention facility in Burlington, Massachusetts. How did that visit come about, and what did you see? What were your conclusions based on what you saw there?
Well, I think it certainly has come about because of the way the Trump administration has handled customs and enforcement. And I think that the Trump administration, while they have advertised that it was about getting the worst of the worst off the streets, which we would all agree with. I mean, you don't want career criminals. You don't want those who absolutely take advantage and prey upon people, extortion, sex predators, you name it. But at the same time, what's happened is more and more, it's about people who are here with a visa, individuals who show up at perhaps a courthouse to regularize their status. And it's the detention center that I witnessed yesterday, and I wanted to see for myself what it was that took place inside. I've got a tour, lasted about 40 minutes, took a look around. There are 15 detainees. They are individuals that are there about 12 hours. They do have a right to see an attorney if an attorney can be prescribed for them. But I think that evidence based upon what happened in New Jersey just 48 hours before, it highlights, I think, that the disproportionate response of the Trump administration to what is really a law enforcement issue, but asking ICE to undertake law enforcement when many of them do not have the training that local police forces have, I think is an inconsistency.
There are people who have characterized ICE now not just as an organization that is dedicated to the proposition of illegal aliens being in this country, as a national police force. I've heard people describe ICE that way. And certainly with a lot of their interactions with the general public, based on either skin color or time of day, it doesn't seem like when they stop people, there's a lot of reason to stop people. Are you concerned about this idea that it's sort of a police force that falls outside of the jurisdiction of how we regularly treat police forces?
Well, there's no oversight. That's for sure. My own suggestion is that the responsibility should be returned to the Justice Department, where they were at one time, and that there needs to be a better understanding of what their mission statement is. And I don't think that they should be interfering with legitimate transactions that take place at a courthouse over the regularization of status. We need immigrants. We also need an orderly system. We need to know who's in the country. So there's a very important role for what proper immigration form could take. I look back at the argument that we've seen during the Trump administration that anybody and everybody in the country whose status is being questioned is a criminal. That's not true. And I think that our economy right now needs them. I think that the latest issue as it relates to Haitians, for example, the way this has been done, I've supported legislation in the House with some Republicans, by the way, to grant temporary status for them while we assess how it might take place to get them into a system where they could qualify for citizenship. But our economy here, even in the region, could be severely set back given the role that they play perhaps in nursing home care. And they are individuals, they're very dedicated for anybody who's had any interaction with them. And I think that it doesn't take a PhD to understand who's putting the roofs on a lot of houses and people who are now afraid to go to work. And here's the clincher for me. These are individuals who want to be Americans by choice. And we ought to provide that system to them. My barber's an immigrant from Italy, the shoeman's from Portugal, the former tailor was from Russia, and a woman across the street that used to have a delicatessen from the tailor She was an immigrant. They all wanted to be Americans by choice. So we need to provide that opportunity in the hope that occurred for people like my grandparents. And I worry very much that this turn that the administration has taken, it has very little to do with reforming the system and everything to do with simply enforcement.
I know that this is going to put some pressure on my boss, Steve, because I want this to go out real quick. And the reason I want this to go out real quick is that we don't have a 24-hour news cycle anymore. We've got like a 15-minute news cycle now. And this morning, I just wanted to check what CNN was saying about the war in Iran. And so literally this morning it was talking about the Strait of Hormuz that should be reopened very soon, or they would hit Iran very hard. They're also talking about that the U.S. military has burned through nearly 80% of its interceptors. And still, there was an Indian flagged vessel that was struck and sunk by a projectile off the coast of Yemen. And so now there is additional pressure about just what is happening in the Straits of Hormuz. What bothers me the most about this, other than the fact that lives have been lost on both sides that didn't need to be lost, and that we're spending a lot of money that really couldn't be spent, is that we have made things worse with the Obama plan that he negotiated with the Iranians.
Which I voted for.
There was stability. There was an edifice of inspections and regulations. Trump, of course, tore that up during his first term. And now we have this war that they don't even want to call a war. It's an excursion. And so I'm wondering, as a member of the House, this must be enormously frustrating for you and your colleagues, because the House is supposed to have something to say about us going into war.
That's our constitutional obligation. And I have voted for the War Powers Resolution as it has come before the House on 2 different occasions. The Senate, as you know, they've been slow to almost not acting at all. There is very little accountability that comes from Republicans. If you talk to them privately, 50% of them disagree with the president, but 100% of them are afraid of the president. And that's had much to do with this. The Trump administration is flailing in the Strait of Hormuz, and most people know it. So we've driven away all of our allies across the globe and then asked them to participate in the Iranian incursion. 20% of the world's energy supply goes through the Strait of Hormuz. That's a reality. If anything, Iran has become emboldened. If the president had set out to do what previous presidents had set out to do, with trying to find an encompassing group of allies that would be helpful, there might have been a better success story here. But I think that when the Secretary of Defense says that at the moment the expenditure is $38 billion, nobody believes that. They have sought clearly to understate the casualties and the injuries that have occurred. If anything, I think at the moment that the Strait of Hormuz is more and more in the hands of the Iranians. And I think, again, exercised properly with our allies from NATO, who the president has now just completely driven away.
Right.
And I think that there could have been a very different outcome here. Our role in the world is increasingly isolated. Who would have thought that a president of the United States would be threatening to seize Greenland, threatening to make Canada the 51st state, and then we go back, or the president goes back and complains that they are not supportive of his unilateral position as it relates to the Strait of Hormuz in Iran. Nobody was cheering for the Ayatollah. We're all glad the Ayatollah is gone. We all would like to see structural reforms come to Iran. But that's why the Obama plan was working. And there was a lot of consternation at the time. I stood up and supported it. I think that that's your job as a member of Congress. There weren't many people, Mike, who voted against the war in Iraq. I was one of them. I thought that we were ill-served by the briefings we received. I don't have a military background, but I knew the argument that was coming was similar to the one we're getting now. This will be easy. The president said, as former Vice President Cheney said about Iraq, in and out.
Right.
Oil revenue, not to worry about it. So Trump said that we would be in and out in 4 to 5 weeks. We're now into the 6th month with no real exit strategy. Donald Trump has announced 38 different times that the war in Iran is over. By the way, generally those announcements take place on the weekend or at the weekend. And the reason for that is to juice the stock market on Monday morning.
Right.
And that's what it's about. So I think that the chicanery that has come from the administration and from the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of State as it relates to Iran with this misleading suggestion that we are prevailing at the moment when it is more like a stalemate at the moment.
What also interested me is that prior to Trump's actions, ships were coming in and out of the Strait of Hormuz with no problem. And they didn't have to pay a fee. And now the Iranians were saying, well, maybe we should have them pay a toll. And of course, Trump picked up on that too and said, well, we've got our Navy blockade. We could make millions off this. And it's like, nothing has been accomplished. Nothing has been accomplished with this other than complete confusion and the threat that somebody is going to lob a shell at you if you're trying to go through the strait with your cargo.
So let's go back to your original point, which is salient. As you mentioned, the news cycle. Our job is not to entertain people. Our job is to source the facts and report to people, to inform them. So more and more of what we witness now is about entertainment. It's the meme. It's the emoji. It's the short, tart statement. That's not how you really devise policy. Democracy is slow. You work your way through it. You come up with some pretty big solutions over a long period of time. But in this instance here, the president is now getting ready on Truth Social to charge people for inside information.
Well, this is leading into my next question right here.
Good.
Right here.
And by way of disclosure, I had no idea that he was going to ask that question.
No, I did. So this is from CNBC this morning. Donald Trump's social media company has discussed charging Wall Street traders and investment firms as much as $100,000 a month for faster access to the president's post on Truth Social. I was so flabbergasted. It was like, this is saying, hi, I'm going to manipulate the stock market. And if you pay me $100,000 a month, you will know what my manipulations are before anyone else does. Therefore, you can manipulate the stock market as well. And this whole business, when Trump gets interviewed recently about the economy, his go-to answer, well, the stock market's doing great. Well, people can't afford the gas that they need to get to work. People are having problem affording the food because of inflation. Whole industries are suffering. Our tourism industry in New England used to be having a healthy dose of Canadians coming and spending money. The Canadians said, the heck with that.
Well, I've taken
I'm just astonished at this.
So I've taken Donald Trump on twice in front of the Supreme Court. For 4 years, I challenged him on his tax records, went to the Supreme Court eventually after 4 federal court decisions and prevailed. In addition, I filed a front of the court brief on the president's tariffs. And it is the affordability issue. It's his tariffs that are driving up consumer prices for everybody. When he says that it's not a big deal, of course it's a big deal. People are paying $4.11 for a gallon of gasoline. That's a big deal because that means they spend less on other necessities of daily life. But the Truth Social issue is fascinating because he's been losing money on Truth Social. After, by the way, in his second term, it's estimated that he has enriched him and his family by $2.5 billion. And the answer is, I would have made more money in the private sector. I mean, that's pretty porous. But I also think that when you look at the idea that a president of the United States is now going to sell insider information on his motives, thought process, and his outtakes to a concerted audience that's going to buy the information. So you could be on both sides of the stock market in that one, buy and sell.
I just view it as outright bribery.
Yeah.
I
think it's a fair term.
It really just floors me. And you mentioned tariffs, and I have to say I've been seeing these reports about large companies, getting money back from tariffs. Now, I'm old and feeble, but I thought the president at once said that individual Americans might get a tariff return check as well. Of course, I'm still waiting for my Doge check, by the way, which is not forthcoming. And a lot of people are saying, well, wait a minute, we're the ones who ultimately paid for that tariff. Shouldn't consumers be getting something back, especially at this time of inflation caused in part by the very tariffs?
Some of the companies are saying that they are going to return the tariffs. I was never naive about this as it relates to the president. I knew he would move to another round of tariffs under other federal law, which he has done precisely. In fact, he's been able to dredge up pretty archaic law with his latest round of tariffs. Seldom are they ever used, or have they ever been used, under the purpose of a national threat. And I think that Amazon and Caterpillar have said they're going to offer some relief to the consumers, but I'm not naive. Donald Trump was always going to slow walk the tariff returns after the Supreme Court decision because he's using it as a source of revenue,
Right.
which then makes it look as though the national debt is coming down.
Which in reality, actually, it isn't.
No, it's not coming down at all, but he's able to say it.
Right.
And then he uses stock market returns, capital gains right away, because that means more money for the Internal Revenue Service. And then that money is applied to the federal budget. So twice he says, whether it's tariffs or the return on capital gains, that will bring down the size of the national debt. There's no truth to it.
So I got to ask you about the Speaker of the House and when I watch these reports and read these reports, it would appear that he's having a control issue, that there are...
It's a safe assumption.
Thank you, sir. Because it seems like there is more and more Republicans who, based on the issue, are deflecting. Just what you just mentioned, that privately many of them have misgivings about what's going on, but they don't necessarily put them in action. And now there does seem to be some breakaway from the orthodoxy, so to speak. Do you think Johnson's in trouble in terms of being the speaker?
Yes, I do. We're quickly coming to the end of the primary season. And then it becomes more about the individual than it will be about Trump once the primaries are settled, because he's had a disproportionate amount of influence as it relates to Republican primaries. And Republicans know that. So you have what is worrisome to all of us. You had the Tea Party evolution that took place. And Trump capitalized on it, managed it, and then espoused it by picking these candidates from across the country. So as he prevailed as recently as Texas in the Senate primary between Paxton and Cornyn, it frightens more and more Republicans about getting on his wrong side. But what's troublesome to our Democratic example is that means a very small slice of a very small slice is making these determinations. Mm-hmm. And I think that Trump has capitalized on it. And I think Johnson, who, by the way, Trump has described as, I could be Speaker of the House and President at the same time. Can you imagine what the reaction from Nancy Pelosi would have been if Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, or Joe Biden said that?
Sure, she would have been enraged.
Enraged. And Johnson acquiesces, I should say he surrenders. And right now, as we speak, he has a 3-seat majority, given a resignation that is apparently taking place in North Carolina today or in the next few days. And I think that his problem is that they have thrown fire on some of these fringe people. The problem is the fringe people don't want to help put the fire out. They want to engage it.
Right. It's interesting to watch. It's this sort of weird de-evolution of his power. And ultimately, I don't think Trump has really helped him. Nor do I think that his I mean, he just toadies to the president. He doesn't ever criticize anything that he's asked to do.
There's a reason that Congress is mentioned as the first branch of government. That's to challenge the executive. That was the Madisonian belief, not to create a king, not to create an emperor, but to stand up to the president when you thought that they were wrong. In this case, not only did they not stand up, they voluntarily surrender their constitutional responsibility and acquiesce to anything and everything he says. Did you ever believe, just because I know you're a pretty good student of this business, did you ever find a Republican who was for tariffs over your career?
No.
I mean, when Ronald Reagan left, tariffs were at 2.7%. I mean, if you thought that George Bush Sr. would have been embracing tariffs, no chance of it.
Based on my very limited knowledge of economics, tariffs I thought were always sort of placed in a negative light, that they weren't in a truly effective way for us to engage in trade.
It was better to threaten them than to implement them.
Right. So we're coming up to the close of our half hour. As I need to talk to you a little bit about the campaign. You are participating in a debate on TV 22 with your Democratic challenger, Jeremy Whalen. During the course of the last few months, I know you're out there meeting voters, because I see it on social media, what you're doing. What are people telling you at this point? What are their concerns?
Well, it's certainly the affordability issue foremost, in some measure driven by tariffs and the war in Iran. And at the same time, I think that there's a frustration because the inflationary trend that has come about because of it means even if you were getting a pay raise last year of 3.5%, if inflation is at 4%, that means that you're not gaining anything. So many of the challenges you have here, as Trump keeps trying to tell people that the economy's doing great, they don't feel it. I think people at the very top are doing great. I think the billionaire class, they're really doing well. But I think for people who are in the middle, given the cost of housing, given the decline of manufacturing jobs, and I'm so proud of what we did at CRRC, we've kept that plant going, 300 unionized manufacturing jobs. And I think there's just a genuine frustration that people are feeling. And Trump's number has now tumbled to 34% in latest polling. And I think that you're hearing a lot about that as well. But the traditional defense for me of Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, extending the Obama tax credits, I think we need to get out front right away. If I'm returned to the chairmanship of the Ways and Means Committee after the November elections, I intend to take up the Social Security issue right away to give people the confidence that they need as it relates to it. And certainly to take on the issue of long-term care. I think that's another big issue for the American family. The average cost now of long-term care is $117,000 after tax.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people are celebrating for good reason, the fact we're all living longer, but there's also a reality. If you're living longer, that means more Alzheimer's, more dementia, and we're going to need more long-term care. So I'm ready to take these up. I think that coupled with restoring the tax credits for the Inflation Reduction Act, offshore wind, renewable energy, all of those issues which I've been part of and advanced and advocated for, and in many cases written, that's where I hope we're going to land.
So I feel that I can ask you this question because you and I are within a few years apart of one another in age. Age and term limits has come up in many races, and particularly here in Massachusetts in the Senate race. Seth Moulton has said that he has been attacking Ed Markey for being 80 years old and that he shouldn't go forward.
Without saying it, he's attacking him.
Well, that's true. That's true. But at the Moulton-Markey debate, afterwards in the spin room, I was able to ask Moulton, I said, okay, you're talking about this a lot. Do you support term limits? And he says, I also support an age cap.
Yeah.
Now, when you hear this theme, and it's being repeated across the country in various races, that either an incumbent is too old or has served too long, how do you react to that?
Well, I think in a representative democracy, the best test is still what the voters think. I think that the media does its part, draws attention to the issue, and reports on it, as they did with Dianne Feinstein. I think that clearly she had been there beyond her best years. But there are other instances where you have people who seem to do quite well. And Experience does count. It's an important consideration. And I think that if people are vigorous, they're on their job, I think that then the voters get to make that decision. I understand ambition. My God, you'd be hard pressed to come up with somebody in the Pioneer Valley that has expressed more ambition over a longer period of time. But history didn't start the day that the new generation was born. And I think that in some instances, they'd like to have you believe that all of a sudden, that, as you noted earlier, the emotive value of making a simple argument, of using a platitude without any specifics. I mean, I will say this, I don't think that Seth would cast many votes that are different than Eddie Markey. I mean, that's just reality. So what does it become? You try to find that narrow range of differences if you can't express specificity or you don't have a proven record to run upon.
Okay. As always, an absolute pleasure to speak with you,
I enjoy
sir.
it, as you know.
And folks, I hope that you watch the debate on TV 22, because this is the way you learn more about candidates. And I also hope that you stay tuned right here to Focus Springfield, because we've got a very busy month here in August as we get closer and closer to the primary. So thanks very much for watching this evening on Focus Springfield's Government Matters.